Republican senators having voted against an amendment which would prevent the government from doing business with military contractors that deny their employees the right to sue for discrimination, including for sexual assault. 30 Republican senators furious about the heat they have been taking ever since for putting corporate enablers of rape ahead of women who have been raped. 30 Republican senators now blaming not themselves for the considerable fallout, but in our fourth story in the countdown, targeting the Democrat who had deigned to introduce the amendment, restoring victims' rights, if not common decency. That's right, they're blaming Senator Al Franken of Minnesota, and I'm not kidding. You will recall that mortified by the story of former KBR Halliburton employee Jamie Lee Jones, who alleged she had been drugged, beaten, and gang raped at age 19 while working for the company in Baghdad. Senator Franken last month introduced his amendment to the Pentagon spending bill. The measure passed 68 to 30. 10 Republicans voted yes. 30 voted no. Those Republicans now mightily steamed about how they are being portrayed for their votes. And because they say Senator Franken is not doing enough to stop it. Senator Graham of South Carolina is suggesting it would be helpful for Senator Franken to come forward and say, I'm not suggesting that anybody who votes for my amendment is indifferent to crimes against women or anybody else. Senator Bond of Missouri saying that from what he knows of Franken, he expected such tactics. Some senators like John Cornyn of Texas alleging that Senator Franken isn't abiding by the unwritten rules of the Senate. Quote, trying to tap into the natural sympathy that we have for this victim of this rape and use that as a justification to frankly misrepresent and embarrass his colleagues. I don't think it's a very constructive thing. I think it's going to make a lot of senators leery. Others, like Senator Thune of South Dakota, blaming the liberal blogosphere, which apparently rules the world. Quote, I don't know what his motivation was for taking us on, but I would hope that we won't see a lot of Daily Kos-inspired amendments in the future coming from him. I think hopefully he'll settle down and do kind of the serious work of legislating that it's important to Minnesota. I guess he's saying rape isn't important to the voters of Minnesota. Time now to call on our own Eugene Robinson, Associate Editor, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist of the Washington Post. Gene, good evening.
Evening, Keith.
So, 30 Republican senators voted against an anti-rape amendment, in essence, and now they want the amendment sponsor to explain why their votes against it were okay, as if it's his fault that they've been, just merely misunderstood here?
Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And does it make any sense? No, it does not make any sense. Stop him before he makes us vote this way again. They might have read it before they voted on it, or before they had the kind of knee-jerk reflex to vote the corporate position on a piece of legislation without fully understanding what it was intended to do.
But earlier this month, thus this week, there were some Republican sources who privately acknowledged that they had failed to anticipate the political consequences of a no vote on this amendment. Is the inference from that being that they don't believe the no votes are the problem, only that they've become a public embarrassment?
Well, clearly the embarrassment is the problem. If no one had noticed, and if no one had called them out on it, which, by the way, it isn't Senator Franken who's calling them out on it. It's various others in what they would call the demonic liberal blogosphere. But clearly, I haven't heard from those 30 senators expressions of remorse for having cast this vote, but rather remorse for their vote having been made public and been made an issue.
Well, then we need a secret ballot in the Senate, don't we? And simplify
we
everything.
Do. Why do we have to write this stuff down?
Yeah,
I mean really, come on.
Don't need those reporters there or anything like that. The Thune statement, which he says Al Franken is taking them on. Maybe I'm just being naive here, but I thought the amendment was designed to take on military contractors who may not be conducting themselves in concurrence with decency or law.
Exactly. It was not an attack on Republican senators who might vote against it. The legislation had a specific purpose, and it sprang from that case, was inspired by that case that you talked about in the intro. And it is amazing that the senators would again be casting the blame on Senator Franken when all they had to do was read it and then make a decision about it. The ones who did read it, I assume some of them did, decided it wasn't a worthy piece of legislation. That's a fine position for them to take. It's just that they do write down these votes. There are reporters in there, and at the end of the day, people get to know about it, and they get to form opinions about it. So this is kind of unseemly whining about something that they did themselves.
But is it really insightful? I mean, did we get an unexpected insight, say, from Cornyn talking about the unwritten laws of the Senate here? Because is essentially it's you only pretend to read some of this stuff and really not know what's going on, and somebody tips you from the other side. It's what was the movie, Advise and Consent, where Peter Lawford had to wake up the senator who appeared to be 206 years old, and he would just come out of his sleep and go, "Opposed, sir, opposed," and he whispered in his ear, "No, I think you're in favor, Senator." Aye. Was that? I mean, those are the unwritten laws of the Senate. Nobody pays attention.
Well, maybe. I mean, one imagines that Senator Franken was supposed to go around to each of them and explain, if you vote against this, I realize it might anger some of your, corporate friends, but you're going to catch a lot of heat on this. The Senate's rules are arcane. Its byways are folkloric. This is one I'd never heard of. I don't think you have to kind of give a sort of side effects listing to every senator for every vote.
Yeah, a little Surgeon General's warning on the side of the legislation, or your mileage may vary, or something like that.
If trouble from the liberal blogosphere lasts more than 4 hours, see a doctor immediately.
That's right, break glass. Gene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist of the Washington Post. Great thanks for being silly, as always.
Good to talk to you, Keith.